Alright, welcome back. So in this video, we are going to start seeing the ways in which you can actually, refer to, call APIs in your own code. And actually, there's this one way that we're going to use, but you can access APIs from the terminal too. That's what I want to tell you, right? And that you can do through this curl command, right? You don't have to install this. You don't have to do anything. This is already present in Mac, and Mac it is present. Gurm it is present. I'm not sure about Linux and Windows, but anyway. So there's actually only one way in which we are going to refer to APIs from inside our code, right? Inside our code files, JavaScript files. But just to let you know that there's another way is that we can access that through the terminal. And it is, I think, evident that we're not going to write commands on the terminal when our website is already hosted on the web, right? And we're not going to sit here and do commands. So this is not actually very useful, but I'm just showing you that you can do this. So that you can do through the curl command, which is pre-installed in Mac and pre-installed in Gurm too. I think it must be installed in Linux too, but I'm not sure about that. And I'm not sure about Windows too. You might check about that, right? But for the Gurm ID, you can just type curl and then you can write the name of your API, the URL of your API. I'm not going to use an API just yet. I'm going to refer to Google, right? And I see I get a lot of data back here, right? And what exactly is this data? This is just the response that I got back from Google. And this is the same response that I get back if I go here and I write this, right? And if I inspect this page, if I view page source, this is actually the thing that I'm getting back here too, right? This is the same thing. And of course, this is not useful because whenever we are using an API, we don't actually call APIs that return something like this. We call APIs that return something like this, right? So let's try calling this API. I'll copy this and first I'll clear my console, then I'll do curl, I'll paste this. And I see I get this good JSON right here. And this is the type of format that you would have in this too if you did not have this JSON view extension, right? No spacing, nothing, right? So you see that if we look closely, we have this IP, then we have type, continent code AS, continent name Asia, country code India, right? So a lot of these things. So you can see by just writing curl and the API, I can actually access my API in here. But that's not what we're going to do. We are going to access them from inside our code, right? And for that, first off, I'm in the web dev course, the root directory, right? And what I'm going to do from here, I'll make a directory called APIs. Then I'll cd into APIs, right? And inside this, I currently have nothing. So first thing, like always, is npm init. Enter app.js, enter, so on. Great. So now we are inside our APIs folder and we have our package.json ready. Now the first thing, I'll make app.js, then I'll open app.js, then I'll do npmi-s. We're of course going to need express and alright. So I'll let that happen first. We actually need two packages in this. We don't actually need EJS because we are going to do simple res.send here. We're not going to render HTML page because that's not the point of this particular topic. And the other package that we're going to install is called request, right? And this is the package that actually helps us to make API calls from within our code, right? So we'll let it install. Until then, we'll start requiring it. Const request is equal to require request, right? And that is downloaded too, right? So now let's make our server first Why am I putting a comment? I'll do app.listen 3000 res dot console.log listening on port 3000. Excellent. And the next thing I'll do is the routes. You should be comfortable with this by now. These are just the basic routes, right? I'll do app.get. This will be a simple slash. And this will be res. Excellent. So we have our basic structure set up, and inside this we are now going to first I'll do res.send hello, and now we'll start our server nodemon, and then I will go to project running URL import. I'll copy this. Okay, new tab, paste, go. So I get hello. Excellent. So my basic get route is working. Now let's start working on the API thing. Right? Now I'll do require https://www.google.com. So what we're aiming to do is get all the Google data back, right? And now inside this we're going to give our 3 arguments, right? So require takes first the URL and second the callback, right? So in the callback you will have 3 things: error, response, and body. And I need to put the fat arrow here. Excellent. So now inside this callback, the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to check if there's an error. And make a note of this format, and we'll be using this a lot, right? If there's an error, the first thing that you do inside a callback which has an error is that you check that if error console.log error. What happens is that if some error happens while making this request, that gets in this error object, right? And if it doesn't happen, then this remains null. So this if statement is not executed. Right. The next thing that we need to do is we need to check if response dot status code. So what is this basically? What just happened? So what happens is that response that we're getting here is actually an object which contains all the details about the request, right? If there's no error, the request was successfully made to the API and we got a response, then error would be nothing. But let's say the API didn't even exist, right? So that would be in the response. So response is basically an object that has all the details about the response that we're getting back from the API, right? And one of those details is the status code, right? And status code, if you remember in the Postman section, we have seen that the 200 was the status code standing that your request came back successfully, the response came back successfully. What you could have is 404, that would mean that the page wasn't found. And 500 means that there was an internal server error. So there can be a lot of status codes and they can mean different things, but we just need to know that 200 means that our request was made successfully. And what we can do now is we can do res.send body and not the string. So body will contain the actual answer to this require statement, right? And if I refresh, and this needs to be request. Yeah, and if I refresh, I see I get a lot of data back, which is not properly styled because I don't have the style sheets. But anyway, we just got the HTML back, which was rendered by the browser. And to get a better idea of this, I'll remove this and I'll copy this thing right here. So what you can do is you can copy this whole link from me, because this long key that you have, to get this you'll have to actually sign into this website and sign up with your account and all that. So you can avoid that. You can just use my key because this isn't actually useful later. We're not going to use this API. So anyway, now if I refresh, I see I get the same data that I was getting here, except I didn't have to write that in the browser, and I simply wrote that in my code. I visited my website, and then I printed that out, right? So now we could use all of this data inside our code. We could like make an h1 which had body.ip in it. We could make an h1 with, then below that we could print the zip, right? And we could do a lot of things. So you see how this can be helpful, right? Because we can get data and we can use that by referring to it inside an object, right? Great. So yeah, so this is how you would use an API inside your own code, and yeah, that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next.